What's going on, guys? Welcome back to the channel, and today we're going to be doing my very first Diablo 4 Druid tier list video. Now, I know these videos are typically pretty popular, but I haven't really felt compelled to do one in the past. However, with all the significant changes coming into Season 4, as well as all the anticipation for this season, and the fact that I was probably one of the very few creators actually covering the Druid during the PTR, I figured I'd go ahead and give it a shot and see what you guys think about it. But before we get started, I did want to go ahead and make one correction from the video I released yesterday covering the developer livestream as well as the patch notes. In that video, I had stated that after you kill each tormented boss, you would then receive one Replendant Spark. However, that is incorrect, and in fact, you will only receive one Replendant Spark after your very first Tormented boss kill. And that brings the total to 3 Replendant Sparks that you'll receive from completing objectives in the game. You'll receive one from the brand new Iron Wolf Reputation reward system for Season 4. You'll receive one from your very first kill of Echo of Lilith, and then you'll receive your third one upon the completion of your very first Tormented boss. So now that we've gotten that out of the way, let's go ahead and get into the tier list. So starting off for our very first build in the S tier, we're going to be picking tornadoes. So tornado builds in Season 4 are going to be incredibly strong. One of the biggest reasons for that is because tornadoes now have a double cast affix you can apply to your weapons. And this affix alone makes tornadoes incredibly powerful. However, another big reason why tornadoes are going to be incredibly powerful going into Season 4 is due to the fact that the Thunderstruck legendary node in your Paragon board is uncapped, and that gives your storm skills a pretty massive multiplier because it gives you 20% of both your damage to close and damage to distant enemies damage buckets as a multiplier. And with the large increases to your affix stat rolls, you can actually get your Thunderstruck multiplier well over 200%. Now, there's also a reason why I said tornadoes and not just Were-nado, and that is because there is a ton of spirit generation coming to the Druid class as well as all other classes going into Season 4. So not only are you going to be able to play the very popular Were-nado build, but you're also going to be able to play the human version of that build. Also, another reason why I really like this build is because of how easy it is to actually play. You basically just spam tornadoes and there really is no need to manage your cooldowns whatsoever. It's an incredibly powerful build, but also very user-friendly, and for that reason, it's definitely ranking in the top tier Druid builds for Season 4. The next build I'm going to place in the S tier for Druid is your Boulder Cane builds. So this is actually a pretty strong build in Season 3 right now. And this build will continue to maintain that same level of strength when compared to all of the changes coming to Season 4. Now, not only does Boulder have a double cast affix for Season 4, but Hurricane has also been massively buffed to deal quite a bit of damage. Not just that, but now the Shepherd's aspect also takes into account Wrath skills, further boosting up Wrath skill damage, and Hurricane is a Wrath skill, so you'll be receiving quite a bit of damage just from your Hurricane being active. Not just that, but there's also affixes that increase the duration of your Hurricane, making it much easier to maintain your Hurricane before it goes on cooldown. Now, this typically hasn't been a problem for the majority of Boulder Cane builds even in Season 3. However, if you choose to forego a two-hander with the double cast affix on Boulder, that is something you might want to take into consideration. Now, Boulder Cane does require a little bit more effort in terms of play style compared to tornado builds. However, that extra effort is typically rewarded with some pretty hefty damage numbers. And I think overall, if you guys choose to go the route of building out a Boulder Cane build, you're definitely going to be happy you did so. Now onto our very first A tier build for the Druid, and that is going to be Lightning Storm. So Lightning Storm is still going to be really good going into Season 4, but not quite as good as it's been in Season 3. Now, where Lightning Storm still gets that nice jump in its damage from the uncapped legendary node Thunderstruck, it, however, does not have a double cast affix, which is definitely a big reason why I went ahead and put this into the A tier. However, if you are a big Lightning Storm fan, whether it be a werewolf version of Lightning Storm or a human version of Lightning Storm, again, there are still going to be a ton of spirit generation coming to the game, and not just spirit generation, but it is going to be incredibly easy to build crit chance going into Season 4. So Lightning Storm is still going to be incredibly relevant for high tier content. Now into the next A tier build for the list. list, and it should be of no surprise, and this could probably be even S tier for hardcore players, and that is a pulverize build. Now, pulverize has always been pretty reliable throughout all seasons in Diablo 4, and it will continue to maintain that same level of relevance going into Season 4. Now, even though Banished Lords did receive a sizable nerf, you're going to be able to build an incredible amount of HP on your werebears, which should more than make up for any amount of overpower you lost due to the nerf to that specific unique. You're also going to be able to build your werebears much differently than previous seasons, where instead of scaling your overpower damage, you'll be able to now scale your critical strike damage and get a lot of damage out of those versions of pulverize. This should give you some flexibility in terms of how you build out your pulverize builds, and even though pulverize doesn't have a double cast affix, it does have an affix that will increase the area effect size when you cast the skill. And it's actually a pretty sizable increase when I tested it on the PTR. You can basically hit packs of enemies from an entire screen away. So not only is pulverize going to have a lot of damage to offer the average player, but again, it is going to be one of the more tankier builds going into Season 4, and in my opinion, that is probably going to make it an S tier build for hardcore players. Now for my last A tier build, and I think this one is going to surprise a few people, and that is going to be landslide builds, believe it or not. So going into Season 4, Landslide does have a double cast affix, and not only that, they've also incorporated a unique ring called the Earthbreaker ring, which when combined with the double cast affix for Landslide, actually makes this build do quite a lot of damage. And in fact, during the PTR, I've seen several people complete tier 200 pit runs using the Landslide build. Now, I know a lot of people, including myself, really had high hopes for the Earthbreaker ring in terms of using a trampleslide setup, but I think that if you are interested, go ahead and give Landslide a try. I think you're definitely going to enjoy it a lot more, and I do plan on making a human caster version of a Landslide build for Season 4. Now onto the very first B tier Druid build, that is going to be Trampleslide. Now, Trampleslide has always been a really fun and reliable build to play, and in Season 4, that's not really going to change. And in fact, if you turn this into a hybrid build with Landslide, you could probably move this up to tier A. Another really cool thing that they recently changed in the patch notes is that traversal skills for keyboard and mouse players will now be able to travel to the borders of your screen. The only exception being if you are using a ultra-wide monitor. I think due to this, a lot of keyboard and mouse players will probably have a lot of fun playing a hybrid landslide trample build. However, the reason why I'm placing Trampleslide down in the B tier is because the Earthbreaker ring does not actually function when you cast Trample, meaning that it doesn't get the same damage increase that you would get when you cast Landslide directly from the Earthbreaker ring. Now, I would like to mention that the Earthbreaker ring will function if you cast Landslide and then Trample over the top of it, but that is the only way you'll be able to get that specific unique to function with Trampleslide. So if your plan was to run a pure Trampleslide build, or maybe a Trampleslide subterranean build, you're still going to have a lot of fun doing so, but if you want to be pushing those higher tier pit levels and you want to do it a lot easier, I would highly recommend coupling your Trampleslide with the Landslide hybrid. The next build I'm going to be placing in the B tier will be a pure companion build. Now, this build has seen a lot of buffs going into Season 4, and it will be a pretty good overall build to play. Now, it is worth mentioning that in the recent patch notes, they also went ahead and buffed the wolf skill. Your wolves will now have 200% more HP, as well as a reduction in their respawn rate from 10 seconds down to 5 seconds. And this was actually a pretty big pain point for your wolves when scaling into higher tier content. They would pretty much always get one shot and become pretty useless. And given the fact that they were a pretty sizable chunk of your damage, this is a much welcome improvement to the skill. However, during my testing on the PTR, the wolves still felt pretty clunky overall. There were plenty of times where they would just be standing there, not attacking enemies whatsoever, as well as there would be times I would use the active skill for the wolves and the animation would go through, but the damage would not actually hit the enemies at the targeted destination. Also, when compared to previous builds mentioned, this build does have a bit of a bigger learning curve. And on top of that, the Raven's active skill is still pretty laughable in terms of damage. And this will continue to be the case with all the changes they made to the health scaling of enemies in the pit at higher tier pit levels. So if you are looking to play a companion build this season, you will definitely be able to. However, if you're looking for something that does more damage and has a much easier playstyle, I would opt for one of the builds previously mentioned. Now on to the very last B tier build build here, and that is going to be a pure shred build. Now, shred is still going to be as consistent as it's ever been, and is still going to see a sizable buff in its damage output with all of the different affix changes coming in Season 4. However, I think this build will be much better in a hybrid situation. Something like a shred hurricane or shred rabies, maybe even shred pulverize would be really good. But on its own, just as a pure shred setup, I think B tier would probably be the best place for this build. It's still lacking a lot of AoE damage that you get from other builds. It has high mobility, but due to the fact that you have to get up close and personal with the different enemy types in the game, it definitely puts you at a much greater risk of getting one shot. Also, the only unique that really does anything for shred is the waxing gibbous, and that is probably one of the worst uniques in the game, and it could definitely use a sizable buff and probably even a complete rework due to the fact that achieving high levels of crit chance in Season 4 is going to be pretty easy overall, and the 100% crit chance you would get from the waxing gibbous is going to be pretty useless for the build. But overall, I think this is a pretty solid build, and when used in a hybrid situation, will definitely scale much higher going into in-game content. Now onto the C tier, and the very first build we're going to put up here is Rabies. And this really isn't there as a pure Rabies setup. I'm only putting it there to kind of symbolize the Wrath skill tree in general. So I do believe in Season 4 there are going to be a ton of builds that I'm not going to mention in this video that will pop up due to the fact that Wrath skills now work with the Shepherd's aspect, and a lot of the Wrath skills have been buffed pretty substantially. So I do suspect that there will be quite a few builds out there that will pop off that maybe not a lot of people are expecting to. So Rabies hybrid builds, Hurricane hybrid builds, really anything that encompasses that hybrid umbrella. I think that even though the base structure of most builds are going to be pretty static, requiring to use all of the companions to buff up your skills using the Shepherd's aspect as well as Stampede, there will still be plenty of opportunity to utilize different skills to take advantage of that aspect of the Druid, to allow players to make builds that, even though the structure is pretty similar, they do work differently to some degree. And then for the last C tier build I'm going to throw here, and this is actually not something I got to try out, but I do wonder how well it will function, and that is a basic attack Earth Spike build. So much like Wind Shear, Earth Spike has a double cast affix you can roll on your gear pieces to allow you to have that opportunity to double cast Earth Spike from a single skill use. Also, Earth Spike has received some buffs in the recent past, as well as a rework to the affix that affects Earth Spike to make it where it deals a substantial amount of damage. That, coupled with the fact that they've added several affixes to the game that boost your overall basic skill damage, I think there's a chance that in Season 4 you could see a surprising Earth Spike basic skill build actually exceed a lot of people's expectations in terms of how high it can scale into the late game. However, like I said, I really have no practice with this build yet, but I do plan on trying to make something later on in Season 4, and I thought it would be a pretty fun idea that I could go ahead and throw in this video to see what you guys think about it. And then now for the very last slot, and this is something that's very unfortunate in my opinion, because I really love this build. In fact, it is my favorite build to play. That is the Stormclaw Druid build. And I'm talking about a pure Stormclaw build, not a variant utilizing just the lucky hit chance to proc other effects from the Stormclaw setup. Now, I know this might upset a lot of players, and again, this is just my opinion based off of my experience on the PTR. But I do believe that Stormclaw will continue to drop in its ranking, much like it did from Season 2 into Season 3. Now going into Season 4, I think it would probably drop even further, down into the very bottom of the Druid build tier list. Now, one of the biggest reasons why this is the case is because how uniques are set up going into Season 4. So unlike all of your legendary items going into Season 4 that have seen sizable increases to their overall affix stat caps, your unique items actually will not be receiving those massive boosts to their overall values on their affixes. Now, this is especially bad for the Stormclaw Druid because in order for the Stormclaw Druid to function, you have to have a Crone Staff, and the Crone Staff is obviously a two-hand weapon. So not only do you lose 2 aspect slots on your Druid, but then you also lose 2 slots of massively increased stat rolls. On top of that, we're also going to have to contend with the fact that we're losing a lot of damage reduction going into Season 4, and Stormclaw is a build that naturally puts you into compromising positions. However, unlike in Season 2, you're going to be lacking a sizable amount of damage to make up for that problem. So due to the previously mentioned problems, as well as the fact that I still don't think basic skill builds scale very well going into high-end in-game content, I think that a lot of players will probably put this build on the back burner and hope that it gets buffed in the future. I know personally I look forward to the day that I can plow through dozens of enemies using Stormclaw builds, much like I did in Season 2. But that really covers my Druid tier list before we get into Season 4. Now this probably will change once I actually get my hands on all the Season 4 content, and I may make a video in the future that updates my tier list. However, I might do these just at the beginning of each season, just to give those that might watch my content an idea as to where to start their druids off. But let me know what you guys think down in the comments section. Do you agree with what I have in my tier list? Are there some changes that you would make? What are some of the builds that you think are going to be sleeper hits going into Season 4? And also, did you like the video overall? But as always, guys, I hope you're having a great day or a great night, depending on wherever you're from. And peace out, guys. I will see you in the next one.